Hello, everybody, and welcome to Positive Fandom. Welcome to the Burnettwork. I am Artem, and tonight we have with us Julian Mushkin. Julian, how are you today?
I'm doing just wonderful. How about yourself, RM?
I'm doing great. Julian, you and I are continuing our reviews of For All Mankind Season 4. And tonight we're going to be talking about Episode 2. Julian, did you get a chance to watch Episode 2?
I sure did. I was actually kind of surprised. I saw a notification pop up on my phone last night that it was available to view, and so I thought, wow, cool. So instead of trying to catch it real early in the morning as I was getting ready for work, I was able to watch it last night at my leisure. So that was nice.
It was nice, Julian, and certainly, I think what's really interesting about this particular episode is how different the mood is, as far as I'm concerned, from episode 1, which seemed to have a lot of optimism to it, and still that sense of adventure. Whereas in episode 2, things are changing. We kind of talked a lot about the notion of the normalization of space travel, and is it the norm? Can you just go anywhere? But something that I was not expecting to see in this episode was sort of this fantasy versus reality. We see these YouTube videos all the time where they'll say the commercial and real life, one versus the other. And I'm making that comparison because we saw one of the characters, I think his name is Dale, who this entire travel into space and work has been something that's like a godsend to him, because he wanted to do something that he could earn more. And he also talked about the notion of getting back into doing work similar to what he was doing on his offshore drilling rig, how that was some of the best years of his life. I mean, there's even that scene where it's actually the beginning of the episode where he's in I guess, a spacecraft. And when they look down, they can see the original Sojourner capsules and unit. And he takes out a digicam, his digital camera, takes a picture. And it's so exciting. It's exciting. It's like, wow, this is so great. And then when they land, things are very, very different. Julian, what did you think about the contrast of this fantasy, and then you're hit with this sudden harsh reality of what actually is happening to this character in the show?
That was very interesting. I really liked it. They are setting up a definite a labor differentiation between groups on the Mars base there, and obviously, there seems to be a stratification of, the astronauts from the different, space agencies are, living very well up in the top levels of the base, whereas the Helios personnel are now finding themselves, they're living in these sub-levels, in these barracks room, cubicle type things, and they're getting socked for everything that they, their food and their clothing and their laundry, and even their internet connection. I'm sure it's all, being taken out of their pay. So they're not earning as much as he thought he would, because a lot of that stuff back at home, that's easy. That's easy stuff that you don't have to worry about. But everything here has to be shipped out to them. And that takes a lot of that. That's weight that has to be moved over millions and millions of miles. And so it's very uncomfortable, this stratification of who gets to live well and who doesn't. There's a very stark differentiation between what they're eating. Here is the Helios personnel having to pay for each and every little meal they eat, and it's just stock, rations. Whereas the astronauts are up in a cafeteria with a beautiful setting. They have windows looking out over the Martian plains, and while they may be paying for their food, they're eating a lot better than the Helios groups that are there to do basically the menial labor is essentially what's going on here. So, it had me thinking of, how you have rich companies like your countries, even like Saudi Arabia, that bring in these labor pools, because they want to attract all these rich people to come and live it up in their cities and say, look, you can do all these things and it's wonderful, and live in these big tall towers. But at the same time, they have to bring in all this labor from all over the place. They're basically trapped there and forced to work at really crappy wages to service these elites. And it's the same type of thing that's happening on Mars. And it also had me thinking of groups like Halliburton, where the military goes into these places and sets up their bases, but instead of having commissary and things like that ran through the U.S., Department of Defense, they bring in these contractors like Halliburton that do all this stuff. So you have all these other civilian contractors in there doing this work and not getting the benefits of the U.S. It's probably the same type of thing. And one thing that is nice is that with Danielle Poole coming up to take over command, she's starting to notice these differences. And she's not happy about it at all.
Yeah, you certainly said a lot there. And I think what was really interesting is that this poor guy, I think his name is Dale, thinks that he's going to Mars for one job. But then when he gets there, he's told that there's this kind of freeze on positions, I guess because of the accident or whatever the reason is. And now he'll essentially be doing almost the same job he was doing on Earth for less pay. And not only for less pay, but for even less than what he thought he was going to take home, because they are nickel and diming him for everything down there. He thought he was going to be working on the surface. Comes to find out that he isn't even going to see the light of day. It's quite a shock. And, he's told later on in the episode that if he decides to go home before his contract is over, that he'll owe Helios $100,000, which is like an incredible amount of money.
Yeah.
That's, unreasonable amount to expect to be able to pay that back. He can't do that, but that's how much it would cost. And it is an eye opener because his job is so different from what he thought it was going to be. He's essentially doing, and they kind of, looked at he's like, I'm a handyman, like I'm an HVAC guy on.
Yeah.
Mars. And that really was very eye opening, because not only are they kind of not in the same realm, or at least as let's say the engineers, the scientists, the astronauts, not only are they not in the same realm as those guys, but they're also kind of looked down upon by maybe some of the other people on the base. So, they don't even, it's almost like they're not even there. There's this dirty little secret in the basement. And that is surprising because there's no reason for that. And one of the workers talks about, well, I thought this would have been like the first Mars Thanksgiving where they share and there's going to be this camaraderie and we support one another. What do you think about that notion? Because it feels almost as if Ed doesn't even think about the way things are arranged on Happy Valley. What do you think about Ed and his approach? Do you think some of the reason why these guys are looked down upon is because maybe Ed isn't prioritizing some of the treatment of the employees?
Yeah, it's exactly some of that. We even have a scene where Dale has a chance to call out Ed. He says, "Hey, what's going on with all this?" And Ed, as an employee of Helios, he is an employee of Helios, but I think he's in a position where he thinks of himself as, I'm an astronaut. I am Ed Baldwin. I went to the moon. I did this. I did that. I don't think he doesn't consider himself part of their group. And that is a big failing here. So he doesn't, he's a total company man now. he's like, that's just the way it is. The company has to spend X amount of dollars while he is busy living like an executive, essentially, being able to live well in the top sections there because he's the astronaut and he's, in kind of second in command of the base. But yet the guys underneath, they have to eat crap. And it's not good. I didn't, I didn't like it at all. It's very uncomfortable to see that he is unaware, totally unaware.
And they are just like charging people, money for everything, for the uniform, for the toothpaste, for all the stuff that they probably have in bulk. That's pretty darn cheap, like when you bring it in bulk. So it is quite shocking that they feel it's okay to do this to these people and take it out of their paycheck. So they don't even get a chance to pay it, like it's already automatically deducted from everything. And that was also something, but Ed seems pretty happy where he is. And as of right now, I'm not going to say that, he's always had a relationship with Danielle that's been okay, but, you kind of feel a little like resistance to her being there, or anybody, honestly. It's not just her. Anybody who might be telling him what he has to do, like he's not okay with that. And I don't know. I mean, he managed to kind of work with her in this episode. She gave a beautiful pep talk to so many of the other people who are in Happy Valley. She really was very gracious and kind and talked about how she remembers that astronaut from the Russian astronaut and how great he was.
Grigori.
How he was such an important part of her survival. Certainly that was very good to hear. But she also kind of felt, she made a comment about, if you have something to tell me the truth. I want to hear the truth. And she's quite shocked when she gets there. She gets on there. The place looks great. But when she goes to call out to Lee, who is the first man on Mars from, he can't even talk to her. What do you think about the way that he was being watched physically by another person? He couldn't even walk around without being watched.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised that they allowed him to go back, knowing what the involvement would be, because they already consider him suspect for having spent so much time with the decadent capitalist, countries. So, I mean, we know how North Korea is even now, and so it's not surprising that they are being so stiff with their behavior. I'm kind of really amazed that they are part of the group at all. So we'll see what happens with that.
Mm-hmm.
That speech that Danielle gives, even though it's so, you see like she wants to be more open and everything, still she's only really talking to the upper echelon groups that are there, the astronauts, the scientists, the specialists. I don't, we see her start to kind of like be wandering around and seeing things, but we see that her life is like totally different from what's going on with most of the Helios employees there. And I am looking forward to seeing how she's going to react when she sees what is really going on there. I mean, we've already seen her make the decision to get the internet back online for the rest of the base, whereas Helios just was going to sit there and go, well, it's not worth it to go out there and fix it, and they'll just have to make do. It's like, oh my God. It's like you got these people that are stuck on a planet millions of miles away. What are they? They're just supposed to sit on their ass? That's a good way to foment a revolution. If you're withholding, resources to a big portion of your population. And I don't understand how they're not seeing this. So I don't know.
Yeah, they really turned a blind eye to a lot of the troubles going on, and you're right about Danielle not really approaching or speaking to anybody in the lower levels because that's where they are. They're sort of in a subterranean area of Mars. And the notion of not being able to talk to your loved ones for weeks and weeks, that's devastating enough. I mean, you're on another planet, but that must have been so terrifying and annoying. I mean, I'm just so shocked that was allowed to continue and pretty much unchecked on that station to a point where they didn't even have television, as you mentioned. Imagine just being so disconnected. And Danielle mentioned, she's like, you remember when we were on in Jamestown and how we didn't have anything, it was just the bare necessities. Ed is using it as if they're greedy. That was also another description that I wasn't expecting him to say. I mean, they're there for work. If you're working, then you're not greedy. You're working and you're earning a living. So I think it's interesting. Why do you think he equated that with greed, and where do you think that's coming from?
Again, I think he's become a company man, and he's just living. He's following the company line that the executives are at this level, and the workers are at this level, and it costs X amount to get all this stuff up to Mars, and so we're in this for profit, we're in this for business, and so if you're expecting more, then too bad, tough shit. So I think they're forgetting that there's gonna be a cost, a payback, and not financially. It's going to be in human, uh, uh, well-being. That there's going to be some sort of together on this. Not some people get to enjoy the time there and others don't.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting that when they do get on to let's say the base, if you will, Happy Valley base, the man who's their boss, who's just one level below Ed on the hierarchy, mentions that there are emergency exits and emergency locations and stuff, and that nothing, just because it says it's there doesn't mean that it's actually located there. And I think that was indicative of how much they don't care about the safety of certain individuals in Happy Valley. I mean, that's like a violation if where it says this is where your first aid kit is, and you go in there and there's nothing in there, or this is the best escape route or the fire route or whatever you want to call it. Pretty much everything that's labeled down there isn't labeled accurately. And, the North Koreans have their own location. You're not allowed to go in there. But we find that some of the people who are on this lower level have figured out a way to kind of deal with the restrictions and deal with the neglect that they're feeling, because it is kind of neglect. At least I think it's neglect in a sense of the company to their employees. And there's one guy in particular, I don't know his name, but he approaches Dale right away, and he almost sneaks up on him. And I'm sure for a lot of people, you see somebody who's like this. I don't know if I have an image of him. Yeah, I do. You see people like this. They kind of say, "Hey, come here," and you're like, "What is it?" Because that they can't sort of like advertise what they want to say. But I thought it was very clever to have sort of like, if you will, this underground and underground, where people who are down there and pretty much trapped, as I said, it feels like they're trapped in this position for 2 years. They had to create this other place or another way to get goods, and it exists there in Happy Valley, this separate location, even a physical location. Julian, what did you think about that?
No, I'm not surprised by that at all. Yes, he probably has set up some sort of a little black market type of a situation there. They've created their little speakeasy where they're, distilling liquor and trying to make the best of their situation there. Because again, this is where we're at. It's like they can't, use. They don't. They're they're getting nickel and dimed, and what are they going to do for entertainment? You know, there should be like regular movie nights and stuff for them. You know, there doesn't seem to be any type of social, you know, thing set up for the regular Joes that are working there. You know, so this is very disturbing to me.
And it's very prison-like, you know. I mean, it's not a prison, but it feels almost as if they're trapped, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. Certainly, we find out one of the other people who are down on the lower level, these lower level employees, is someone who was in a very important mission. Was in the mission when Gregory was the first man to step on an asteroid, or yeah, on an asteroid, and you know, Dale was surprised that she was on that mission, and she informs him, well, you know, there was another person who died that day. And she explains to him, you know, just the notion that even someone's death isn't enough to get anybody recognition around there. What do you think about that? I mean, I always assumed that if we didn't hear about all of the casualties necessarily very specifically, but she's almost implying that these additional deaths are completely irrelevant to everyone and they mean nothing to anyone. What do you think about that?
Again, that's uncomfortable. It's all of this is setting up, you know, some sort of a reckoning eventually that, you know, this group of people there are going to find that this is, you know, this behavior is intolerable. It's going to get to a point where it's going to create a situation that's either going to be very deadly for some of them, or where there's just work's not going to happen because they're like, hey, you need these services. We're not going to provide them for you until we get some, you know, either unionize or, you know, get some recognition of what we're doing here, because we're all in this together, but you're treating us like we're just, you know, the common worker here to make it work for you, you know. So it's going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how they're going to develop this storyline, because it's obviously going, it seems to be setting up something going in that direction, I think.
Now, I
mean,
couldn't find, and I'm sorry, Julian, go ahead. I thought
no, go ahead.
I couldn't find a picture of the robot, that robot that we all know. He's kind of shaped like a dog, I guess, like dogs. And we've seen this on the internet so many times. It might be MIT or Harvard or one of those companies that developed it, and we've seen it.
The Boston, I can't remember what that company is, but yeah. But this one definitely looks like an extension and kind of like a futurization of the robots we've been seeing in real life now. Yeah, it was pretty cool looking.
It was amazing in that sort of like pseudo, you know, foreign planet terrain that it has to go through, and the experimentations with it. And of course, we get to see Kelly. I don't have a picture of Kelly here, but she's still, of course, pursuing her research on finding life on other planets, and she's excited about it, only to find out from the director, this gentleman here, that it's probably not going to happen, is it, Julian?
Nope, not until they can secure the issue with the mining on the asteroids. He has promised the president that is going to be their primary goal, is to get that online. And until they do, their funding, their funding can only go towards making sure that works. They probably had put an awful lot into that rigged system to try and push the asteroid, and so now they have to go back to square one to figure out what they're going to do to move that thing. I think they should have just put like some thrusters on there. They should have, taken a thruster rig from something and kind of, attached it to the asteroid, and then used remote piloting telemetry to move it to where they needed to go. And this whole thing with the, like taking a pencil to push a tennis or basketball is kind of silly.
It was silly, and after we watched episode 1, I had said, "Do you think we're going to see robotics?" And you said yes. And sure enough, there were the robotics in this episode. And I have a feeling that not only are they going to halt human interaction on some of these asteroids, maybe it'll be these robots that are going to go do that work. But who's to say? Kelly has found out that her research project is not, probably most likely won't go forward, even though it's amazing work. And even Alita, who hasn't been able to bounce back from her troubles, just internally finds herself going back to NASA to talk to them. It's very awkward. She's in such an awkward state right now. Julian, do you think she's going to be able to get herself back together?
Oh, I hope she does, but something tells me that her PTSD is going to kind of hit her again at the wrong time. But one of the things that comes out of this, of course, is that she makes the realization. I mean, we find out that she has been on an extended leave from NASA, but hasn't actually left NASA. Here she is. We see her. We think she's finally ready to come back. She's going to try and talk her way back into it, but he makes it clear that she's going to have to see a therapist to clear her for work coming back. And during the course of that conversation, of course, she has a little bit of a flashback to when she discovered that Margot is dead, supposedly, from the blast. And she realizes she's not ready to do this. And maybe it's not the right thing for her, and so she quits. She leaves. So that was kind of, I was like, well, yeah, that's kind of in keeping with her character. It sure is. And she finds herself at the bar that used to be owned by Kelly Baldwin, or not Kelly, but what was Ed's wife? What was
oh man,
I can't remember what she was. I can't remember what her name
Karen.
was. Karen.
It's Karen,
Karen,
right?
wasn't it? Yeah, Karen. But Kelly's there, drinking a little bit too much, obviously. And the two of them get together and decide that maybe we need to go into business for ourselves. So I have a feeling that they may end up actually working with Dev, who's doing the robotic stuff. And so that may become another private concern that ends up on Mars.
Yeah, I definitely could see
kind
Dev.
of froze up. And you there?
I definitely can see Dev continuing his work, going on and getting a huge contract or other investors to do this work, especially if this proposal that Alita has put together showcases Kelly's work and makes it financially lucrative, because I don't see him necessarily wanting to throw a whole bunch of tech at something that's not going to bring back a dividend of some kind. Do you think she's included that in the proposal, maybe replacing a lot of the workers who are on Mars now?
I don't know. I don't know exactly how that would work. All I know is there's probably something important. The fact that Kelly is so sure that they can discover some microbial life on Mars, and what a big thing that would be, just in general, for everyone, for all men, humankind. But I don't know how that would translate for a private concern into money, into a profit type of situation. So, but still, it seems like that would be the thing that's somehow going. Right? So
Yeah, it is something to think about. And, I think Alita has been thinking about this for a long time about what she's going to do with the rest of her career. And, it just so happens that she runs into Kelly, but, I think it is very interesting that she manages to create this proposal, what feels like at a minute's notice. Um, do you think that Alita in her mind was thinking about leaving NASA, even though she had been working there? um, all this time? Do you think in the back of her mind, she's thinking, I need to move on from NASA? Maybe they kind of are limiting what I can do as maybe not just Kelly, but Alita. Do you think Alita is thinking that in her mind, that she's being limited at NASA and that she does really need to move on now?
I'm I'm kind of stuck on my read on Alita. I don't know. All I know is she's suffering from PTSD, but she also has throughout her the time that we've known her, she seems to be experiencing kind of like a um, I have to prove myself every single time. You know, nobody is doing anything for me. I have to do it myself, and I have to prove myself. And if you don't like what I'm giving to you, then screw you all. You know, she's very not giving in in ways that of trying to work with people often. You know, it's so um, I'm not exactly sure what it is that really prompted her to leave NASA suddenly, but we have that, when she's talking with Kelly, she's talking about how she's left. It's always been her. She's always left places that she's worked or been, and, because of issues where she just didn't want to deal with, what was going on there. And I think there's points about that she's still not ready to be honest with herself about regarding that. So um, maybe it has to do with having been illegal when she came into the country, that her mom was dead, that her dad was deported, all these different things that she can use certainly as excuses. Um, they seem to be sabotaging her. So.
And perhaps the most interesting thing of all in the episode, Julian, is this situation with Margot, where she wakes up. It's another day in Russia. She wakes up, but she notices that the streets are quite empty and quiet. But that doesn't stop her from her routine. And certainly, she gets dressed as normal, does her stretches, and then she ends up looking outside only to realize that something big is going on in the neighborhood. Julian, what were your thoughts about these scenes?
Uh, this became kind of uncomfortable. We had the previous episode where the person sidled up to her and said, "I know who you are. I know what you're trying to do, and you should just lay low for the time being because things are going to change." So she seems to have an idea of something that was afoot. Now we see, nothing but ballet on the TV, and the other stations are like, test patterns. The phone's not working, and she's hearing lots of sirens. And even the guys who were, the KGB guys that were always parked outside keeping an eye on her, they're not there. That was a big thing. She's like, where are they? Why aren't they here? Something's going on. She goes to the bread shop, gets her thing. She asks about it. He says, nothing's wrong. You should go back to your place and just stay there. Because he knows something's wrong. And the safest place to be is at home and not getting out in the way of anybody who could assume that you're up to no good. And so we see on her way home, her favorite, paper seller is getting told to close up his shop by the police. And he doesn't want to, and they're not explaining. They're just saying you have to for public safety, and he's like, this is my job. If I'm not selling papers, I'm not making money. You know? So he resists, and a lot of other people resist because, like all authoritarian regimes, they think, hey, we're the authorities. We tell you what to do. If you don't listen, then it's a kibosh on the head. Sad, so sad. And it devolves into a melee, and Margot gets stuck in the middle of it. That was... She's supposed to be a smart person. I mean, come on. How naive can you get? It's like, but yeah, because I saw that coming from a mile away. It's like you don't want to be there. So yeah, her glasses get knocked off. She gets apparently being hauled away. So that's going to be very interesting, especially when they go, oh well, you're about Gansky. What are you doing here? So who knows what's happening? Gorbachev was the president at the time, and of course, because this is a different timeline, of course, he's gone farther because of the success of the Soviet Union in the space race and all that kind of stuff. They've existed. The Soviet Union is existing longer than it did in our world. Now, I wanted to look it up, so I looked up, and Gorbachev, there is an unsuccessful coup in 1991 that was in our world, that was led by the Marxist-Leninist hardliners in the Politburo, and it failed, but shortly after that, the Soviet Union kind of crumbled, which was not what Gorbachev wanted, and then we got Boris Yeltsin and then Vladimir Putin, who Gorbachev was, was staunchly against those two in the ways that they were, controlling Russia, what was left of Russia anyway. Specifically, Putin, I would be sure that he had nothing but contempt for Putin. But be that as it may, we could be seeing something like that right now. We had grumblings in the previous episode of some people that were not happy with how Gorbachev was leading the Soviet Union, and that there was too much Western influence happening in the Soviet Union. The decadence of the West coming in, the capitalists coming in and sullying the great Soviet Union. So seeing that this unrest is part of this. Now, is there an economic upturn? So it's kind of strange to see that there would be this power struggle when the country is doing supposedly well. So I'm very interested in seeing how they're going to spin this. Like, no, we're becoming too like the West, and we're not going to do that, and so we're just going to take over. So.
Well, it has me troubled, and as you said, Margot is an intelligent woman, and it is kind of a shock that she would get herself wrapped up in this in a situation like this. She really not only intervenes, but then she kind of looking around, and she's like, I don't have an escape route. And she ends up being taken away. They were bringing in these, what looks like, I guess, vans or whatever, and taking people away. And that was terrifying. The thought that she might end up in some kind of prison somewhere. And we might not see her for a long time if this is the case, if that's what happens to her. Certainly something that's shaking up things, but it might also be a good time to kind of get out of the country if she had to, or figure out where or how she's going to make her next move, because things aren't looking that great for Margot. There is obviously some political unrest there, but I also think her situation there was not great. She wasn't, they were tolerating her, but they didn't really like her very much.
Well, again, that one lady lady told her to hold on because there was going to be some changes afoot. Now, that could mean that these are people that are a little bit more interested in being able to work with Margot. Then again, we don't even know exactly where she's at. I mean, it didn't take her too long to get, up to Star City, apparently. And that's out near, so she's probably way out east. And so for her, I don't know where she'd go, unless maybe going to Star City would be the place for her to seek, help. And maybe that would be, but it seems to me at some point, and I said this before when we were discussing the first 3 seasons, is that the West is, the U.S. is going to find out about her, that she's still alive. If, intelligence services are going to find out, or she's going to walk into the frickin' embassy and go, I need help because I can't live here. This is, they're pulling, they're going to tear themselves apart and I'm going to end up getting killed, and she would be taking a big risk doing that because if she, I mean, nothing, the fact that she kind of like escaped pretending she was dead and escaped to Russia would set off all sorts of red flags with intelligence services in the U.S. Now, as far as we know, Alita never told anybody that Margot was giving, information to the Russians, as far as we know. But, if Alita finds out Margot's alive, what is Alita going to do? Is she going to be ecstatic, or is she going to be, is that anger going to come back? She going is she going to sell her out and say, you gave away our secrets to the Russians, and now, you made me think that you were dead for years. It's like, screw you. So, I don't know. It's very interesting. I mean, they've set up some really good conflicts for this season.
They really have, and I just hope, to be honest with you, you and I were talking about the importance of exploration, the importance of science and discovery in the show, and how it seems like there's a shift away from science and discovery to, making money. And this thing with Kelly I feel is so important, has reinvigorated what I was thinking, that there might be a chance, even if it is motivated through means of making a profit. I'm fine with it, as long as she gets to do her research project before they go and destroy anything that is there that might have life. So I think that is very interesting, but it involves robots. And as I said, I think that that's going to be a shift away from workers. Even you have as few people on the planet as needed. Most of them could be robots, and just people who are maintaining those robots to do the heavy lifting or other work. So yeah, I hope that she does get a chance to do it. Of course, they're implying that that's what happens. And as you said, we're going to see, he'll come back and he will go ahead and run whatever new business it is, life after Helios, but he will run it and it's going to be amazing. And that's going to be a new chapter, but it is something to think about. I think that things will come to a breaking point if Danielle isn't able to smooth over things, to give people a little bit more equality and a little bit more freedom on that base. At least let them go to the surface sometimes. At least let them see some sunshine. It almost feels like, Julian, it almost feels like they are not even allowed to go to the upper levels. Like, are they even allowed to go up there just to fix things, right?
It certainly feels like it. I mean, there should be lounges there for them to enjoy, and obviously is not. They've decided that the space teams, the specialists and the astronauts, get all the prime stuff, and that's just not right at all. Not right at all.
It's not right, I also think that if Danielle mentioned that she could sense the resentment or sense people being unhappy, and I think that that also, the fact that she could sense it, let's say, even if she didn't speak to very many people, although I imagine she must have spoken to a lot of people knowing Danielle. I think that if she could see it, if she could see that, she felt that that was important for running the place and making it a success. So I do think it's very interesting when she goes up there. Ed goes, "Oh, you came up again?" And she goes, yeah, I couldn't stay away. And it's like, little does he know that they asked her to go up there to kind of, make things more viable. It's easier to have her smooth things over than for them to blatantly, let's say, maybe tell Ed he better report home on the next flight or else, you're done. So it was done in a diplomatic way. However, I worry about Danielle as well. I don't want them to leave her high and dry. She's been either on the moon or on Mars, where different companies have decided to kind of take advantage, and she let them know, I don't think it's right what you're doing. So, if they're going to try and pull a fast one on Danielle, I don't think it's going to work. I think they're going to get, she's going to say, no, I don't think so. I am here and we're going to run this place properly so that everybody benefits, or at least there's a little bit more advantages for people when they do come to this location. Certainly there has to be more than just living in what I would call a prison barracks, or whatever you want to call it, like little prison place, the bare minimum, the basics. People can't survive like that. And
Yeah.
like you said, Julian, it was going to come to a head, but it still might if something happens. If things are pushed, we could see things that greatly affected, including either, what if something happened where there was a lack of participation of the Russians all of a sudden, which seemed to share some of the responsibility there. If the country collapses, let's say hypothetically, if the country collapses, does that mean that their space program could potentially collapse? The funding for it potentially collapses. The access to astronauts from their country potentially collapses. It could have quite a domino effect. Do you think that's what's going to happen? Do you think that's what we're going to see in maybe the next episodes?
Yes, that's a very good potential. A political issue, affecting the country affects everything. And yes, Roscosmos could become, a victim of whatever political thing is happening there, and suddenly there might not be funding to send more astronauts, cosmonauts up. Funding for whatever is, whatever, the I suspect that the various space groups like NASA and Roscosmos and the ESA and that kind of stuff, and the Japanese group, I suspect that they've worked out like contracts with Helios as far as their amenities and stuff. That's why it seems so nice for them, because their governments are paying for this. It's not coming directly out of their pockets every time. They may be paying individually for their meals, but they're not getting nickel and dimed like the Helios employees are, because that stuff is just coming right out of the individual, government contracts that are already budgeted for their stay there. So they don't worry about it like the guys in Helios, the people in Helios. They have to worry about it because Helios is nickel and diming them, because that's how Helios makes its profit. They can only charge the government so much for their money, but they still got to make profit for their shareholders. And so of course that's going to come off of the backs of taking everything they can, slashing every budget that they can for their employees, so that they can report that we made this much because we only had to pay this much in expenditures, in administration, and this is what we took in from our contracts. So it's the killer. It's like you can't operate like that. I mean, I'm sure they think they can, but it's not going to set up a situation that's going to be good for everybody. It just doesn't work. And so it's very interesting that they're doing what science fiction does. They're commenting on these situations that we see today in the world, and to be able to say, no, it's science fiction because it's an alternate future. But we all know this kind of stuff. It's like, what if? That's the question. What if? What if business was really important in, you know, private commerce in getting us up to these planets? You know, what would that be like? Well, we're seeing it. We're seeing it in this show, and it's fascinating, and we can think of that right now. We can tomorrow morning. I think they're planning on launching again on Starship. It's another test launching of Starship. Here's a private concern, SpaceX, you know, and Elon Musk is like, I want to put people on Mars. It's exactly what we're talking about. What we're seeing is what we're seeing in for all mankind. Is that what we're, you know, the type of thing that we're going to see from, you know, a SpaceX dominating Mars? Who knows?
Well, it certainly is exciting, Julian, and I'm so looking forward to the next episode. Absolutely none of these episodes have disappointed me. We still haven't heard exactly what happened to Danny, which was a question that we do have, and maybe that's something that Danielle will elaborate about and talk about. Remember what happened when we put people away from everyone else? She might allude to Danny's situation, and that might be a good time to bring up whatever happened to him, if he is even still out there, no matter what. Certainly, maybe that's something she could learn from. But also, as I said, I think that once, if what we're witnessing is the collapse of that government, I have a feeling that their space program will also collapse. And then, of course, poor Margot won't be able to call anybody. The phone isn't working. Like, the phones don't even work. So she won't even be able to make a phone call, which also has me worried. She has no way to get anybody, to reach out to anybody. And that is terrifying. We hear about that on the news, where in a country, they'll cut all the service, they'll cut every bit of communication. You can't reach anybody. Well, this is a real life scenario where it looks like it could be that. So that is also very scary. And also Kelly's situation with Alita, I guess they're going to present it to, let's say, to Kev. And let's hope that goes through. They find a way to get on Mars. We get to see these cool robots working on those incredible asteroids. I'm guessing maybe they'll do that instead. And of course, the ongoing tug and pull. I loved how they showed in the episode before we wrap this up, where on one side was Danielle's experience, and the other side was Dale's experience. And you could see what a difference from left, you know, one side of the screen to the other. Very, very big difference there, and certainly not necessary in this environment. They could share, things could happen. Let's see if they start to share with their fellow man here. Let's also see if we see you know, Ed who finally agreeing to go home when Danielle's tour, you know, and she's like, you know, Ed, you really have to go home now. Thank you for your help with the transition. It's time for you to go. Let's see these robots appear, and let's see what happens to Margot. It's going to be an interesting episode 3 after Thanksgiving. Julian, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Julian, do you have any last thoughts or questions or comments about the show that you would like to say before we end tonight's review?
No, thank you, RM. But I think we covered all the really salient things that were happening in the show that are setting up for this season, and I'm really excited to see the next show. So,
absolutely.
wait another week.
Where can people find you?
They can find me on the Burnettwork, and they can find me here on Positive Fandom also, and they can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And look me up.
Absolutely, guys. So feel free to reach out to Julian here on the Burnettwork or on Positive Fandom. Guys, you can always find me here on the Burnettwork or on Positive Fandom. Please do like and subscribe. I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson, my moderator, collaborator, and good friend. Tom, we are all goof people. Make sure you subscribe to Tom Jr. Jackson's YouTube channel. Right here on YouTube, he has some great reviews. So much fun to watch Tom talk about his favorite shows and so much more. And also, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Positive Fandom, where I do all the parlay and the fandom. I want to thank you, Julian. Thank you so much, Julian, for the shout out. Thank you so much. As my approach is a positive approach, and Julian, thank you for the support for Positive Fandom that you continue to show since day one to this day. Thank you, Julian, for the kind words as always. Also appreciate you sharing your views and comments about For All Mankind. We've been enjoying this. I've been having such a great time reviewing the first 3 seasons, which you can find right here on the Burnettwork, as well as episodes 1 and 2, which we did. We're going to continue to review each episode, everybody. So make sure you come back here for our review for episode 3. It's going to be after Thanksgiving For All Mankind. Guys, thank you so much for being here. And remember, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.
Cheers.